In the windswept wilds of the Isle of Jersey, where the relentless breath of the sea carried stories of hardship and whispered promises, a girl was born into a family suffused with both warmth and sorrow. This was 1853, and the Channel Islands' craggy cliffs framed the horizon with an austere beauty. Among the crashing waves and salty breezes, Emily Charlotte Le Breton arrived, the only daughter in a household of 6 sons. Her father, the Reverend William Corbet Le Breton, was a Church of England clergyman who could turn heads with his remarkable good looks, and her mother, Emily Davis Martin Le Breton, was so cultured, gracious, and poised that close friends nicknamed her the Duchess. Their daughter would later become known to the world as Lillie, a woman destined for a remarkable story of brilliance, scandal, heartbreak, and triumphant reinvention. She entered a realm shaped by fierce island independence. Jersey was no ordinary speck of land. It had spent centuries forging its identity amid invasions, maritime trade, and the strong sense that life by the sea demanded tenacity. The Channel Islands, battered by storms and local folklore, formed a crucible of resilience. Lillie, growing up amid this environment, learned from her earliest moments that adaptation, resourcefulness, and a willingness to brave the elements were the keys to survival. But if the setting was rugged and bracing, her own household was defined by both love and tragedy. Of her 6 older brothers, only 2, William and Clement, would live into adulthood. The others succumbed to accidents or illness, leaving empty beds and memories that haunted the Le Breton family like a lingering mist over the coastline. Lillie, though cherished, was hardly coddled. Her brothers treated her more like a fellow adventurer than a delicate flower. She became a rampant tomboy, racing in the fields, climbing trees, sneaking out after dark, and finding mischief wherever it lurked. The quiet churchyard of St. Saviour's was her favorite playground, a landscape more ancient than the memory of any living person, filled with moss-covered headstones and whispers of old ghosts. She and her youngest brother would wrap themselves in sheets, paint ghostly faces, and roam among the graves at night, gleefully unnerving any passerby. They found the thrill of transgression irresistible, a combination of fear and excitement that etched its intensity into her young heart. Eventually, a stern letter threatened them with the prospect of buckshot if they did not stop their nighttime antics, forcing them to lie low for a while. There were other pranks too, from collecting door knockers in the dead of night to teasing guard dogs and vaulting over fences with the agility of wild colts. Lillie's boundless sense of fun made her the leader of the ragtag group, but something else simmered beneath the surface, a contemplative, studious streak inherited from her father. Reverend Le Breton refused to confine his daughter to the usual domestic lessons of the era. Instead, he insisted she learn Latin, mathematics, history, and Shakespeare, all of which he considered essential for any mind, male or female. Even so, Lillie's mother retained a gentle grace that encouraged her daughter's connection to poetry and nature, forging a bond through collecting wildflowers or marveling at the shimmering sea. Though she was barely a teenager, Lillie's mind traveled beyond the island. Talk drifted across the waves of the glittering world of London, that great capital overflowing with wealth, power, and an aristocracy that conducted itself according to rigid social mores. Around age 15, she was invited to a grand ball hosted by Lord Suffield. She went with lofty hopes. After all, she was a parson's daughter from a remote island, brimming with curiosity and a desire to taste the high life. Yet she found London society forbidding and cold. That night she sat like a wallflower, feeling awkward, overshadowed by more confident debutantes. But the experience fueled her ambition. A fierce determination kindled inside her. She would not remain an overlooked girl forever. She believed destiny had grander designs for her. Back on Jersey, she continued her life until she was 20. That was when Edward Langtry, known to friends as Ned, stepped into her world. He was a widower from a prosperous Belfast shipping family, possessed of easy charm and a passion for yachting. He courted Lillie for 4 months, and, swayed by his attention, she married him in March of 1874. She likely believed Ned would open a path to the sophisticated circles she longed to conquer. Initially, they lived in Southampton, but it was not the glamorous setting Lillie had dreamed of. Ned led a comfortable existence, expecting his pretty young wife to share his quiet homebody inclinations. She felt stifled. For 8 years, she lobbied her husband to move to London, that nexus of possibility, the glittering stage on which she yearned to make her mark. Finally, he relented. Arriving in the capital, Lillie's future lit up almost instantly. Tall for a woman of her era, elegantly slim, with a face that struck even the most jaded socialites as breathtaking. She radiated such poise that rumor and curiosity spread rapidly. Before long, her photograph appeared in shops and in newspaper kiosks all over the city, dubbing her the Jersey Lillie. She knew how to command attention without uttering a word. Her slender figure, some called it a wasp waist, set fashion trends, and women clamored to imitate her hairstyle and carriage. At a time when photography was expanding, she found herself in high demand, and soon newspapers dubbed her a professional beauty. This phrase, while fawning, hinted at a scandalous idea that she monetized her looks and charm. Victorian society, outwardly so straight-laced, was in fact ravenous for sensational figures, and Lillie Langtry quickly became one of them. Her circle widened to include the era's leading artists, Edward Poynter, James McNeill Whistler, John Everett Millais, who vied to paint her portrait. She was a muse, a cultural icon, the embodiment of youthful sophistication. Millais, a native of Jersey himself, created an iconic painting of her dressed in austere black, with a white lace collar, cuffs, and a single gardenia at her throat. The image captured a mix of simplicity and elusive glamour that enthralled London. But fame in Victorian London was never purely about artistry. It was woven into a tapestry of gossip, flirtations, and covert romantic intrigues. Lillie, vibrant and hungry for new experiences, found her magnetism extended to many admirers, including noblemen. She met countless dukes and earls, men with titles and reputations for lavish spending. Yet none compared to the most formidable figure of all, Albert Edward, the Prince of Wales, eldest son of Queen Victoria, and the future King Edward VII. The prince, known affectionately as Bertie, had a reputation for enjoying the company of beautiful, witty women. He was bold enough to defy the era's strict moral codes if it meant pursuing his pleasures, and Lillie seemed exactly the kind of woman to capture his imagination. Their first introduction happened in 1877 at a dinner party held by Sir Allen Young, an Arctic explorer. Lillie made a strong impression. Tall, golden-haired, with a keen sense of humor and an irreverent streak, she clearly intrigued Bertie, so unlike the timid, docile women usually found on the arms of aristocrats. He began paying her open attention, inviting her for morning rides in Hyde Park, seeking her presence at royal events. This was a bold move at a time when the prince's affairs typically stayed at least somewhat discreet. Yet with Lillie, he paraded his fascination almost defiantly, fueling salacious speculation in the press. They were seen dining together, sharing jokes, and maintaining a closeness that crossed the line of platonic friendship. Observers noted how at public gatherings he always found his way to her side. Rumors soared to new heights when it was discovered that Lily's husband had purchased, or more likely, that the prince had secretly financed, an estate known as the Red House in Bournemouth, commonly referred to as Langtry Manor. Gossip in the newspapers suggested the deed bore Lily's name, but the money originated from Bertie. He also made certain she was presented at court to meet Queen Victoria, an extraordinary gesture for a mere commoner's wife. The entire scenario brought Lillie an avalanche of attention, far beyond the usual privileges of a society beauty. Some saw her as an unworthy upstart who threatened the moral fabric of the kingdom. Others admired her for enthralling the heir to the throne. Victorian social codes might have tolerated a discreet royal mistress, but the story exploded in 1879 when a magazine alleged that Edward Langtry was preparing to cite Bertie as a co-respondent in a divorce. The editor later printed a retraction, but by then, the damage was done. In a scandal that revealed just how high tensions ran, the editor was sentenced to prison for libel. The prince, deeply angered, ended his overt liaison with Lillie. Yet they would remain friendly for years, and even after he became King Edward VII, her name still sparkled in his memory. At the same time, Lily's emotional ties did not revolve solely around the Prince of Wales. She was also said to have dallied with Randolph Churchill, father of Winston, and the Earl of Shrewsbury. Her marriage to Ned Langtry was essentially in tatters, overshadowed by her very public connections with other men. She found solace in a childhood friend named Arthur Jones. For 4 years they shared a passionate bond, until her pivot to professional acting transformed her life yet again. Throughout these personal upheavals, Ned's fortunes gradually dwindled, partly from financing Lily's rising social status, partly from his own vices. He became increasingly dependent on alcohol, and their home life grew cold. The outwardly glamorous Lady Langtry was a lonely wife behind closed doors. Gossip also swirled around a rumor that Lillie had a hidden daughter fathered by Prince Louis of Battenberg. This little girl, Jeanne-Marie, Janie, was born in 1881. Eager to avoid further scandal, Lillie entrusted the child to her own mother's care back in Jersey, passing Janie off as her niece rather than her daughter. Janie grew up with limited knowledge of her real parentage. Only in her teenage years did she learn the truth, at which point she felt so hurt and betrayed that she distanced herself from Lillie. Ned, for his part, claimed ignorance of the child until she was well into her teens. Thus, Lily's personal life was a swirl of hidden truths, confessions, and heartbreak that contrasted sharply with her radiant public persona. Another turning point arrived when Lillie gravitated toward the stage. Several luminaries, Henry Irving, Ellen Terry, Sarah Bernhardt, encouraged her, believing her charisma would enthrall audiences. Her first appearance in a play called A Fair Encounter was fraught with difficulty. Stage fright paralyzed her in front of the footlights, and she momentarily froze. But she pushed through. The idea of a glamorous society beauty taking to acting was inherently fascinating to the public. Soon, she was touring theaters around Britain, culminating in triumphant returns to London. Her stage success brought financial independence, which she sorely needed as her marriage with Ned teetered on collapse. One of her great roles was Cleopatra, an ambitious choice, since audiences treasured Shakespeare's heroine as a demanding part requiring both regal bearing and sensuous charm. According to the Telegraph, Lillie delivered the finest Cleopatra of our time, enthralling audiences and taking 14 curtain calls on opening night. Despite stepping away from the London stage for some time, she eventually returned in 1891 to her beloved Jersey, playing Rosalind in a local theater and receiving a rapturous welcome. The island that once knew her as a mischievous girl was now celebrating her as a cultural icon. Her celebrity soared to the point that she was regularly recognized in advertisements. She became the face of Pier's soap, her portrait accompanied by slogans about cleanliness and elegance. She recorded endorsements for Dr. Marmaduke Purcell's lozenges, turning her famous voice into a marketing tool. Fashion trends followed her every whim. Women wore Langtry knots in their hair, purchased Langtry shoes, and danced the new Langtry waltz at society balls. Yet fame brought new pressures. Her personal affairs were never forgotten, and the tension with her husband only deepened. They drifted further apart, occupying different spheres, even when living under the same roof. Lillie expanded her ambitions in 1882 by crossing the Atlantic to embark on an American tour. The United States was entranced by tales of the Jersey Lillie, the woman who had seduced a future king's heart. Her American stage debut took place at Wallack's Theater in New York on November 6, 1882, in the Tom Taylor comedy An Unequal Match. Tickets sold out long before opening night. Newspaper columnists breathlessly documented her every step, from the moment she landed in New York to her departure from the stage door after a performance. Merchants slapped her name on a bewildering array of products. Mothers began christening their baby daughters Lillie, and at least one small Texas town renamed itself Langtry after her, courtesy of the legendary Judge Roy Bean, who fancied himself smitten by her celebrity. During her American chapter, she fell into the arms of Fred Gebhard, a wealthy fur and silk heir who seemed undaunted by her prior liaisons. Together, they purchased property in the Gunnock Valley of Northern California, dreaming of a grand estate where they could ride horses and settle into a new life. But tragedy derailed their optimism. In August 1888, a train derailment near Shawan, New York, killed Gebhard's prize stallion, Iole, a champion racehorse. The disaster rocked Fred so profoundly that his own spirit shattered. He and Lillie clashed bitterly, and their romance disintegrated. Without securing a divorce from Ned, who refused, Lillie had little legal freedom to marry anyone else. Gebhard eventually left, and she sold the Gwynock property, closing yet another door. In her personal turmoil, she discovered that the theater remained her refuge. She performed consistently, occasionally retiring only to reappear. Between 1896 and 1898, she withdrew from the stage to spend more time with her daughter Janie, who had by then married Sir Ian Malcolm. In her longing for a normal maternal bond, Lillie tried to reconnect, but the emotional rift proved difficult to mend. Janie never fully forgave Lillie for the years of secrecy. Lillie returned to the spotlight in 1901 with a bold move. She leased and renovated the Imperial Theatre in London. It was a brazen step, especially for a woman often singled out in the press as scandalous or notorious. Yet she intended to make her mark in theatrical production. Her first major offering at the Imperial was The Degenerates, originally produced in 1899, a controversial play that addressed divorce and women's rights head-on. At a time when social convention insisted that a divorced woman was forever marked by disgrace, the play dared to cast such a woman in a sympathetic light. The protagonist sacrifices her own public standing to protect a younger married friend, effectively challenging the entire edifice of Victorian moral judgments. Many saw parallels to Lillie's own life, from public affair to estranged marriage to her unwavering determination to choose her own path. Traditionalists denounced it. Some newspapers called it indecent. But audiences turned out in droves, curious to see the echoes of Lillie's personal story on stage. In several cities, the play faced bans or censorship, and the uproar only fed the unstoppable publicity. Though she was attacked by moral guardians, Lillie's willingness to stage material focusing on female agency underscored her status as a forward-thinking woman who used her fame to question the status quo. Her theatrical odyssey soon included vaudeville sketches in Britain and the United States from 1906 until 1917. These were not conventional prestige roles, but they paid well, and she was accustomed to financial precariousness. She routinely performed 2 shows a day for weeks on end, demonstrating tremendous stamina. She wrote a novel titled All at Sea, and even dipped her toes into early silent film with His Neighbor's Wife, a reflection of her perpetual willingness to explore new realms of entertainment. As a looming World War I began casting its shadow over Europe, Lillie redirected her energy into philanthropic pursuits. She organized and supported war relief charities, raising funds for wounded soldiers and their families. She was also an advocate for women's suffrage, though her stance wavered when certain activists resorted to destructive militancy. Still, it was rare for a publicly scandalous figure to back such progressive causes, and it showed that she was far more than just a social butterfly or a poster girl for beauty. By 1918, with the war's final year approaching, Lillie decided to step away from public life more definitively. She settled at a lovely home she called Villa Loiseau in Monte Carlo, an idyllic retreat overlooking the Mediterranean, far from the cold drizzle of London or the bustling mania of New York. The region's sunlit skies, gardens, and slower pace suited her. She turned her energies to cultivating flowers, entertaining a select group of friends, and visiting her grandchildren, who lived partly in London and partly in Scotland's Poltella Castle, a legacy from her daughter's marriage to Sir Ian Malcolm. Though Janie never developed a close mother-daughter rapport with Lillie, the family at least existed in parallel, occasionally intersecting. Lillie discovered, in that final phase of her life, a gentler sense of fulfillment that did not require constant attention or applause. Yet she never lost her flair entirely. Visitors remembered her as graceful, witty, and flamboyant, even as time etched lines into her once famously smooth face. Her hair, once the color of honey, silvered, and her posture grew a fraction more stooped, but she retained that intangible magnetism. She was, after all, Lillie Langtry, mistress of the Prince of Wales, star of the London and American stage, rumored mother to a princess's child, and longtime breaker of conventions. She had survived censure, heartbreak, financial anxieties, and the sorrow of an estranged daughter. Nonetheless, there had always been a defiant gleam in her eyes. She died on February 12, 1929, at Villa Loiseau, leaving behind an estate that was neither vast nor meager, reflective of her life's ups and downs. Her remains were taken back to St. Saviour's Churchyard in Jersey, where she was laid to rest in the family plot. The island that had shaped her earliest sense of self now received her back into its soil. Newspapers worldwide, from the Times in London to small American dailies, ran obituaries that described her as the most beautiful woman of her day, the society beauty who enticed royalty, the actress who ignited scandal. Amid all those dramatic epithets lay hints that she was more dimensional than any single epithet could convey. A woman who had tested the limits imposed on her sex, who turned her talents to philanthropic endeavors, and who championed progressive theatrical works. She was a paradox, a star who reveled in public admiration yet constantly battled internal sadness, illusions, and secrets. Some only recalled the scandal of her affair with Bertie, or the hush-hush rumors about her daughter Janie. Others treasure her philanthropic side, her commitment to war relief, and her tacit support of suffrage. A fraction of enthusiasts celebrate her stage performances, especially her Cleopatra, praising her ability to hold a crowd spellbound simply by walking onto the boards with regal bearing. And in small corners of southwestern Texas, people still talk about how Judge Roy Bean fell head over heels for the Jersey Lillie he'd never even met, naming his saloon the Jersey Lillie and turning the post office into Langtry, Texas, all to honor his unrequited fascination. For those who look beyond the hearsay and sensational press coverage, Lillie Langtry's tale emerges as something subtler and more profound. Born into a parsonage on a windy island, the only girl amid 6 brothers, 4 of whom she lost, she learned self-reliance and a certain courageous streak that prepared her for a life of extremes. She weathered society's condemnation and used its attention to carve out her own place, bridging the worlds of aristocracy and theatrical bohemia. She dared to claim her space in a society that wanted women to remain demure wives and mothers. Though some might label her a shallow beauty, she was in many respects a pioneer, testing the boundaries of what a woman could do in the public eye, whether by openly socializing with royalty, divorcing her husband, engaging with philanthropic campaigns, or producing a controversial play about divorce. No small feat in an age when most women were bound by formidable rules of social propriety. In her final years, she receded from the spotlight, choosing the calm of Monte Carlo. But the fervor she once stirred in drawing rooms and newspapers did not vanish. Even decades after her death, historians, genealogists, and cultural critics sift through old correspondences, diaries, and news clippings to piece together a mosaic of her real self. Some find a flawed but compelling figure who forever refused to be pinned down. Others see her as a victim of her own allure, a woman unwittingly turned into a national obsession by a prince's patronage. Still others see a proud actress and cunning self-promoter who knew exactly how to exploit a rumor for maximum effect. In truth, she was all of these at once, her identity like a prism, refracting many vivid colors depending on how the light falls. In the twilight of her days, she could look back and trace a path from the tomboy in the Jersey churchyard to the mistress who nearly toppled the Prince of Wales's public image, to the actress who had enthralled audiences from London to New York, to the producer who championed bold ideas on the Imperial Theater stage, to the philanthropic woman raising funds for war victims. The men she loved, the children she bore, the plays she staged, all combined into a single portrait that was as contradictory as it was mesmerizing. She defied boundaries, no matter the personal cost, and lived by her own dictates. Perhaps that is the quintessence of Lillie Langtry's enduring legend. A refusal to remain in the box society would have placed her in. When she passed away on that chilly February day in 1929, many deemed it the curtain call of a bygone era. After all, the Victorian age was gone. Edward VII had died years earlier, and the 1920s were fading into global economic depression. Yet the memory of Lillie did not fade. Even the harshest critics of her personal life admitted she possessed an extraordinary magnetism that overshadowed her misdeeds. Friends recalled that no matter how deeply the seas of scandal rose around her, she invariably reemerged with her head held high, wearing a glimmering gown or a well-chosen, witty remark. She had an innate sense of drama, knowing exactly how to make an entrance, how to deploy a turn of phrase, how to strike a pose that would end up immortalized by painters or photographers. The soil of St. Saviour's in Jersey now holds her remains, but as often happens with people of rare magnetism, her influence stretches beyond her physical resting place. The house known as Langtry Manor in Bournemouth still stands, an echo of the days when a future king loved her enough to buy her a private refuge. In London, Countless references to her linger in old newspapers and the recollections of theaters that once hosted her. In American towns that changed their names for her or wrote novelty songs in her honor, local archivists still stumble on sheet music with "Dedicated to the Jersey Lily" printed on the cover. In Texas, stories about Judge Roy Bean's near-obsessive devotion remain a piece of Southwestern folklore. And in modern popular culture, passing references to Lillie pop up in novels, films, and even television adaptations of the Victorian age, reminding contemporary audiences that she was a defining figure in the swirl of that era's social contradictions. She was, in the words of Oscar Wilde, a delightful creature, that woman, a quote that simultaneously complimented her enchantment and acknowledged the complexities beneath. In her own way, she embodied the spirit of an age shifting from the rigid values of the mid-Victorian period to the more freewheeling Edwardian era. She thrived on paradox, devoutly attached to her father's memory, yet repeatedly scandalizing religious authorities. Extolled as a feminist symbol for staging a pro-divorce play, yet criticized for relying on men's patronage. These contradictions speak to a life lived outside neat moral categories or easy black and white definitions. And so, in the garden of history, she remains the lily that bloomed in the harshest winds, each petal kissed by adoration and condemnation alike. She enjoyed the sunshine of applause in famed theaters, endured frosts of censure from conservative social arbiters, and pressed on, unbowed, refusing to let society define her story. Even as time sought to obscure her legacy, her indomitable spirit and enthralling grace linger, like the faint melody of a half-forgotten tune that echoes whenever we glimpse a photograph of her or read an anecdote about her irrepressible humor. This is the story of Lillie Langtry, who lived unafraid of the world's gaze, who perfected the art of forging her own destiny from the simplest raw material, her beauty, her wit, her steely resolve. She was never simply a victim of scandal. She was never merely a seductress of princes. She was a woman who stared down the swirl of gossip, demanded to be seen on her own terms, and ultimately shaped her life so that it would leave an indelible mark on history. I hope you enjoyed this week's story on Lillie Langtry. I love you all. Thanks for watching.